We're all traders here, so therefore we all love money, right? But I think many of us haven't thought more deeply about our relationship with money. You might not have realized it, but how we relate to money and our upbringing and our life experiences, it really determines a lot of how we trade and how we essentially act out on these patterns. It can affect our risk tolerance. It can affect our overtrading or our FOMO. Essentially, our psychology with money affects so many facets of how we trade. Are we more conservative? Are we more aggressive? Do we want to be right versus the market? Or what are our goals? This is a topic I'm so passionate about. And expert writers and podcasters like Morgan Housel have done an amazing job fleshing this out. And let's see if we can add something to the discussion. Obviously, this is one of the topics many traders discuss with you in their private sessions. You've discussed this with many firms. How does a trader's relationship with money influence their trading and their behaviors and their life?
Well, I think the first place to start, which a lot of people don't realize, is that money is probably the most sensitive topic to discuss with people. It is the thing that people often feel the most uncomfortable talking about. A lot of people feel talking about their sex lives is the most uncomfortable. Sex lives is not even a close second to money. Money is one of those kind of very potent topics and variables in our lives, but something that a lot of people don't address. And that's because it is a very complicated and complex topic that usually emanates from people's relationship that they develop growing up. That's something often people don't explore, but experience. Families, people grow up sometimes with more money, with less money, work with people who have a certain amount of wealth, lost it all as a family, great trauma coming in with financial loss in the family. So there's a whole level of complexity and emotional and psychological variables attached to money, which often then people just act out without really exploring.
So Jonathan, how have you seen these patterns and this relationship that traders have with money unfold in their actual trading and influence their decisions?
Yeah, very often traders act out with their trading involving their P&L when they're not really aware of kind of the role that money has played in their lives. Traders, for the most part, tend to be men. Men often associate accomplishment and success in life as measured by money. So money is a very powerful meaning for us in our society. It is highly valued, and I think that is exacerbated just by the kind of consumerism that we've seen more and more on social media and the kind of the world we live in. So I think people need to kind of understand the backstory for themselves. What does money mean to them? What does it mean to have money, to not have money? And those things, that understanding becomes the key component in terms of their managing money. Sometimes people feel that they need to achieve a certain amount of financial wealth, so that could mean leading to overtrading and extending themselves. Sometimes people are so risk averse based on their own financial history that they tend to kind of not always playing off their back foot and being tentative in trades because they're so fearful of losing. These are the kind of things that get played out because of the underlying emotional, psychological kind of aspects in relationship to their money.
What's so amazing to me is the P&L, as we see it, is just a red or green number on our screen. But that number, that can increase your heart rate, your cortisol can be jacked up. On a really good day, you can feel on top of the world. But then some of those big losses, you can feel literally suicidal. And obviously there's been many traders that have struggled with mental health, have committed suicide. And so what stems with some of that? Like, why do we feel that visceral reaction to just this number?
Well, because I think ultimately it comes around people's feeling about themselves, and when they don't perform well financially, there's a sense of kind of shame and embarrassment and feeling low self-worth. Because the scorecard, like you said, is money. And this is often why when traders make a lot of money, they often can kind of go on spending sprees, houses or cars, in this kind of external way to kind of demonstrate their success. But very often that becomes problematic because they're kind of is an empty quality to that because they're trying to fill a void in terms of their own inner needs, and they're trying to do that by spending without an understanding of how that motivates their future trading and some of the pitfalls that can happen with doing that.
Is it bad that hearing you say that makes me feel good inside, knowing that all those furus with their bright green Lamborghinis feel empty inside?
Well, this gets back into the comparison game at times, and it's a very powerful kind of cycle that people get on. This is kind of almost this hedonic treadmill that traders get on, this pattern of just trying to achieve more, make more money, spend more, and basically often they don't sit and look back what inside them is really of value. And are they really kind of understanding their own level of achievement, or are they trying to achieve a level of success as measured by money because of all of these expectations they had from childhood or from their family or from peers?
Let's say I'm someone that grew up without money, and so as a result, when I make P&L, I'm very defensive. I really don't want to let go of that P&L. I don't really want to put on the risk. And let's say I'm having trouble increasing my size. So assuming step one is doing that introspection and being aware of that pattern, what can one start to do if, because of their upbringing, they're overly conservative and having troubles risking up?
Well, with traders like that I've worked with, I think, again, like you said, the self-awareness is huge. But the truth also is we only can move forward and achieve more if we are willing to create some discomfort and extend ourselves. So with something like that, the process of sizing up or kind of having more risk in the trading needs to be very gradual and incremental and slow. People who are greatly risk averse just need to take that process slowly and gradually and not push themselves too fast. Because if they fail in their minds, then they fall back further. So I think people need to kind of get it, out of their comfort zone, to extend themselves, to improve their own process and their own ability to succeed. But they need to do that in very small incremental steps.
And if they take these small incremental steps, can people really override their kind of upbringing and innate biases? Like, have you seen some big transformations over time? Or?
Well, listen, I think we are all wired a certain way. We all have certain personality styles, which can change again gradually over time. But you're not going to take a person who tends to be more shy and taciturn into a very gregarious person. You can help that person become a little more social and interactive with people, but they're not going to change who they are. So I think part of this is very accepting who you are, but trying to still make the changes that you want to make and not kind of having some idealized way of how you should be, but slowly making the progress you want and taking great joy and comfort in those changes.
So when someone is doing this introspection and looking inwards to find out more about their relationship with money, what are some warning signs that should be a little bit of a red flag for a trader to start to question or think more about?
Yeah, well, traders who I speak to about this, who then kind of have a great deal of fear and trepidation and anxiety, even about talking about it, that's usually the first warning sign that there's usually some financial trauma associated with their lives from growing up. So that's a kind of a first indicator. There are often other indicators where you have traders who have a certain amount of wealth and are fearful of spending things to any reasonable way. And then you have traders who, on the flip side, every $100 they make, they spend $99 of it and kind of are excessive in that. So you see kind of the tail ends of how people use and spend their money are often indicators of warning signs that they have an unhealthy relationship with money.
If someone's overtrading or if someone has FOMO, does that necessarily mean there's a problem, or does just everyone to some degree gonna have some of these issues?
No, I think everybody has those tendencies, but overtrading, for instance, or FOMO comes in different shapes, sizes, and colors. And what that is triggered by for you versus somebody else may be vastly different. So there's not one universal explanation for people's behaviors. And that's kind of the special sauce in my work with people, is really understanding what the underlying variables are and the underlying triggers that get people to spend excessively or take unnecessary risk or are too reserved or are too kind of always playing off their back foot and tentative. Like that becomes the key thing, understanding what that is for yourself and then trying to take the corrective steps.
If someone wanted to explore their upbringing, their relationship, and acting out some of these patterns more, do you think the average psychologist that isn't necessarily a specialized trading psychologist is familiar with these topics, can help one with these topics?
Yeah, but it's interesting because I think that's a topic that a lot of times doesn't get brought up, because in more traditional psychology work, it tends to be more familial, interpersonal kinds of issues that tend to get brought up. And usually there's often a relationship with kind of issues around money and some other related issues. So it is something I've always discussed with people, because I think hearing people's financial history often tells a lot about their family upbringings, levels of communication, what was talked about, what was not talked about, what was shared, kind of beliefs, faulty assumptions, all of those kinds of things.
This is a topic that Jonathan and I could have discussed for hours more. And like I mentioned in the intro to this, Morgan Housel has an incredible blog, an incredible podcast, and a lot of great books on this subject. So if you're hungry to learn more about this, check those out, and I highly recommend you do the introspection for yourself to start to explore your own relationship with money and how it affects your trading.